Today we're going to be covering managing key dates in pipeline. This includes setting reminders for key dates, syncing those dates to a calendar, and sharing those dates in messages. We'll talk about tracking key dates that exist as date fields. So like these dates here, like your standard hard dates, like your listing, acceptance, closing date, etc. Also your contingency related dates that you can optionally turn on in your account. But really important, I also want to emphasize that we can also track key dates that don't exist as hard date fields. Oftentimes there's a misconception that you can only track dates that are hard date fields, but really you can track non-date fields as well. So to do that, we are going to use our checklist templates. The checklists are really what drives it all. It triggers the reminders. It helps me selectively sync which dates I want to appear on my calendar. And the checklists are even going to be what I use to share those dates in messages, okay? So I've gone ahead and I've created a checklist template. So let's head on over there. If I click my name, go to admin settings, and then go to checklists. I've created what I called a key dates and milestones checklist. Okay, so as you can see, I've set up a task for each key date. And one thing I want to point out is that some of those key dates are the existing hard date fields. So for example, the closing date. If I want to get a reminder for my closing date, or for example, my inspection due date, I would need to add them to my checklist as a task and then set them up, very important, with a relative due date. So for these ones, it's pretty straightforward. My inspection due date is going to be due on my inspection due date trigger date, right? But also, you don't have to have it be an existing hard date. So something like the final walkthrough, I can typically know that my final walkthrough usually happens, let's say, 1 day before the close date, if that's the case in my state, okay? So you can use these relative due dates to estimate the relative due date for these tasks. Now, some dates you may not be able to anticipate a relative due date, and that's okay. You can always manually add the due date to the transaction checklist when you know the date field, just like you would any of these other hard date fields here, where once you know the close date, you go into the transaction and add the close date. So for these other key dates that are not hard date fields, the only thing different that you would be doing is you would be going to your checklist and manually adding the due date for that there, okay? So that takes care of how to set up the reminders for those dates. Now let's say that I want to sync these dates to a calendar. To do that, I'm going to use the @mention feature to mention whatever group of people or individuals who need to see this on their calendar, okay? And you can also use the @mention feature to selectively sync certain tasks or dates to a calendar. So for this example, I went ahead and I added, I want to sync these key dates to my agent calendars, okay? So what I did was I went ahead and I @mentioned the role agent. You don't have to, if you don't want all of these dates to sync to the agent's calendar, then you would only @mention agent on the ones that you want to appear on the calendar, okay? So let's go ahead, now that we have that set up, we've mentioned our agent so that we can help with syncing the task to a calendar, and we've set up the relative due date so that we can set up those reminders. So let's head back over to the transaction to see what that looks like. Okay, so now we're back on the transaction. My key dates and milestones checklist has been added to the transaction. And as you can see, it's already pre-populated the due dates for that. So now my agent will get reminded for those tasks. And at any point, if some of these dates change, like remember we talked about, hey, maybe we can't anticipate in advance what the due date for something is, I can always just go in and select an absolute due date and manually assign a due date for any of my tasks, okay? And then from the agent perspective, I'm gonna go ahead and log in as my agent on this transaction. So let's do that. Okay, so when I'm logged in as an agent, you're going to notice that one, all of the key dates are highlighted in green. And most importantly, if I go to my task page, as usual, the agent's going to see a list of all of their tasks that are due across all transactions, right? The dates that I've added the @mentioned for, though, as you can see, are nicely highlighted in green for the agent. But the best part that I love about this is, as the agent, I can filter to see just my @mentioned tasks. So now I have a clean view of just the key dates that I have upcoming for all of my transactions. And then you can take that one step further by selecting the option to sync those dates to a calendar. So instead of having all of my tasks going to a calendar, instead, now I'm just going to have the key dates that I want to see on my calendar. Okay, so now we have all these awesome key dates that are syncing to a calendar, and then anytime a key date checklist gets added, once the agent has synced once, they don't have to sync again. The future tasks automatically will be synced to the agent's calendar. Okay, so let's head back over to see from an admin perspective. The last thing we're going to talk about is how to nicely share these key dates in my messages. So whether I want to share these as key dates and timelines for my client, or give my agent an update on where we are with some of these dates, I can do that using my note email feature. So in my account, I've actually created a couple of email templates so that I can show you a couple different ways that I like to share key dates. So the first one is my key dates template. And I designed this one to allow me to basically just drag and drop my key date and milestone checklist into my message. So this is a message I've designed to send out to the buyer, and maybe I just want to let them know about upcoming important dates, but also let them know, which of those dates have already been completed and which ones have not. So to do that, I'm just going to click and drag my checklist into my email template. And so now I nicely, let me expand this so you guys can see this. Now I have this message already designed with awesome autofill tags, but I've included my checklist template in the message. So when this goes out to the customer, they can see a list of upcoming dates and then see which of those dates have already been completed. Okay. So that's one option, is you can just drag and drop the checklist into the message. The next one is, if I just want to cleanly show a list of upcoming timeline dates, and I don't necessarily need to show it in a checklist format, I just want to insert the date of those important key dates. So to do that, I'm going to select my second template that I've created. And for this email template, I have set them up with what we call advanced autofill tags. And what that does is, for any date that I want to insert, like for example, obtaining the executed contract, I just want to insert the due date for that, right? So I used an advanced autofill tag to automatically insert that date. If you want to learn how to use the advanced autofill tags, down here at the bottom right of your message is a tag link. Click on the advanced autofill tag section of the article. That will take you to this section that shows you sort of the format on how to insert the due date for a specific task. So all I've done is use this formula and applied it to my transaction checklist. Okay, so if I take a look at this message, if I go to preview this, my message is going to be nicely formatted to show the timeline and key dates, and then it automatically inserted the date for me. Okay, so that's a really, really cool way to share those timeline dates without you having to manually insert that information. Okay, so I believe we pretty much covered it all, how we're going to get important key dates, get reminders for them, how to selectively sync those key dates to an agent's calendar, and how to share those to a message